All right, well, it's September 12th, a new week in our class, and we are learning about communicating with students and parents digitally. So far in this unit, as we've had our introduction to digital learning and communication, we have talked about a variety of different things, most recently the MOOCs and the importance of those MOOCs or the existence of them and how they work and so forth. And also your assignment, hopefully you submitted that, I'll be grading those soon, about distance learning principles, and just kind of these assignments are designed to kind of get your brain juices flowing, right? So flowing about what good online education means and critiquing online education as it is. So going back with MOOCs though, there's some interesting research out there, and a lot of you had pretty positive comments about this type of learning that you can do online, that is open, that is available to many different people. But let me just tell you a little bit about some studies that have been done about MOOCs that are quite critical of that type of research and that type of, not research, but that type of interaction and learning interaction. First of all, there's this study by Anush Margarian and colleagues that talks about instructional quality of massive open online courses. It uses a model called task-centered instruction, or the First Principles of Instruction by M. David Merrill, and it randomly selected MOOCs and assessed them based on first principles of instruction. So there's first principles. And it found that the majority of MOOCs scored poorly on most instructional design principles. They scored highly on organization and presentation of course material, but poorly on instructional design, meaning poorly on the quality of the instruction that they actually present. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, the finding from this study actually is that although most MOOCs are well packaged, their instructional design quality is low. And this was an interesting study. Obviously, there are a lot of people invested in MOOCs who created some courses and so forth, but the study is showing that. And also, if you go back to a man that I've worked with very closely in Hawaii a while ago, M. David Merrill, he's always critical of MOOCs. He'll always talk about how they do not follow good principles of instructional design, and this study would seem to back up what he says about that, about how MOOCs have a low quality instructional design. So your experience with MOOCs was just very cursory. You only had a short amount of time to get into those MOOCs and figure out what they were talking about and seeing what they do. This experience goes a little bit more into the depth on the instruction itself. And so I suppose that if you had actually gone through, or if you continue to go through those experiences, you'll find maybe some of those instructional design things are lacking, that there is some lacking elements of instructional design. Now, Merrill's First Principles is the format that they use to evaluate the MOOCs. And these principles are important ones, but I've written extensively about these as well. Let me pull up a little diagram to show about it. So you have here these principles of instruction. And really the first one is problem-centered. In other words, in order for instruction to be effective, it has to be centered on a real-world problem, and in order to be effective. And a lot of times these MOOCs just present information that is not really connected to any kind of real-world problem. Some of you saw this in your MOOCs that you reviewed, and some of you may not have seen that, but that was the deal with that. Hold on. This arrow is not acting the way I want. Oh, I just want some text anyway. And then there are principles like activation. And to start out, this is very much in a nutshell, obviously, about these kinds of effective instruction. But anyway, activation. So when you start out some instruction, it should activate the learner's relevant cognitive structures. It should connect what is going to be learned to what the learner already knows. And that is effective instruction. It has to have that in order to be effective, activation. Well, a lot of these don't really know who the learner is, so how could they activate relevant, memories basically, or relevant ideas that the learner already has that connects to what is being learned. So the next step is demonstration. And I would say that this is probably an area where the MOOCs are effective. They have a lot of demonstration, perhaps, although it might not be related to the problem. All these things need to be closely related to the problem at hand. So demonstration, demonstrating exactly what to do, sharing some ideas about how to do it, sharing some maybe do's and don'ts as you complete a task. So I'm guessing some of the technical MOOCs are good at this, especially. They have like the Excel one that somebody had looked at, I believe, this week, as well as the app development one. They probably do a pretty good job of demonstrating how to do something, but maybe they don't give those non-examples and good examples and so forth. The next one is application. And this is probably an area that the MOOCs are lacking quite a bit, I'm guessing. Application meaning that learners have to have an adequate amount of practice. They need to be able to practice their skill and then be able to get feedback on that skill along with the instructor coaching them. Well, as many of you talked about last week in MOOCs, there's not a lot of learner to instructor interaction. And so application, in those cases, you might submit something and maybe have a peer review it, but you're probably not going to get a lot of coaching from your instructor to help you know whether what you are trying out or doing, the new skill that you're trying out, is actually working. And then finally, the last one is integration. Get this going here. And what that means is that you take the skill that you've learned and you apply it into a new area or a new kind of a thing or a new type of situation you apply it in. And so probably, again, this is probably not very strongly integrated into a lot of MOOCs. So anyway, M. David Merrill's famous, well, somewhat famous person who talks about these principles of effective instruction, and it's called First Principles of Instruction. If you want to look it up, it's the framework that we talk about, and I've also written about it in a way that calls it task-centered instruction. Anyway, my text doesn't want to quite work the way I wanted it to. There we go. And so that's one way to look at MOOCs, and it's certainly not the only way, but it is one way to look at instruction, whether it's effective or not, if it includes all of these elements. And according to Merrill, who came up with this First Principles of Instruction, he would say that MOOCs are ineffective instruction, as the study that I mentioned earlier, Instructional Quality of Massive Open Online Courses, shows as well. So that's an interesting point. What are the effective? There are still effective elements to MOOCs. So what are those, and what can we improve on those? And I think it has a lot to do with, again, that learner to instructor interaction, where the learner is being coached and helped out and is allowed to do some meaningful activities by the instructor. All right. Well, moving on then, talking about this week's topics and content. You have some readings under Chapter 9, textbook Chapter 9, and a few more about how communication with students is important and parents as well. Then you have some presentations, and this first presentation up here is going to tell you more about the assignment itself that you have due this week by Saturday. So again, this one will tell you about the assignment, and then watch these ones because they'll tell you about the different tools from which you can choose to do the assignment, communicating with students and parents. And then finally there's an assignment, digital communication. So again, this assignment requires you to create or set up a way of communicating to a group of students. Now, you may not teach a class at this point in time, and that's fine. You can just create it for a hypothesis, for a, not hypothesize, but a fake group of students if you want to. And again, you're going to use our class as sort of the guinea pigs. So if you need to set something up, you can email it to the rest of the class and invite them to respond and follow through with the responses, and then test out your communication method to make sure everyone can see it, make sure it's working right. But that's the way you're going to do, is you're going to set up this communication and then you are going to just reflect upon the experience about the tool, instructions that you would need to be given to parents or students. So again, it could be parents or students that could be your audience to communicate with. And then you'll discuss the benefits and drawbacks, any troubles that you had, and general benefits of an instructor communicating with parents or students digitally. So you'll submit these items in a document in the appropriate Dropbox. So what you'll need to do is kind of look at again, go back to the videos for this week, presentations for this week. Take a look at some of the elements there to learn about them. Learn about the assignment first, and then take a look at one of the different tools. One of them you might want to try in your experience. It is good to choose something that might work for your work experience that you are currently in, if you have the option. So you can do that. You know, if you've always wanted to try Remind, for instance, or always wanted to set up a Twitter type of thing, or a teacher's guide to creating Facebook, or whatever else it is, you can do that. Remind is a good one to look at if you're not sure about any of these. You can kind of look at that one. It's a nice way to communicate quickly to parents and students. But there are a bunch there that you can choose from, even a blog. So, and then once you've chosen your item, set it up so that it communicates with your group. And then use our class, use some students in our class to communicate with, so that you can make sure it's working. Test it out, make sure that people can view what you're trying to communicate with them, and then fill in the rest of the assignment. Alright, and now I have also added in some online office hours. So right here under online office hours, you can click on that. Again, this week I'm going to try Thursday at 3 to 4 p.m. Thursday, September 15th. So that will be just in a few days, and I'll be online for those days. You can just click on this link to go there, and you'll be able to go join the office hours if you have any questions or any help that you need in order to complete the assignment or work on other things for this week. So I think that should do it for everybody. Hopefully you have a good week about learning and communicating, well, this week, but learning about communicating with parents and students digitally.